How to build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive. Part 66. Removing the old, badly made pistons and piston rods, making new ones will allow me to fit cast iron piston rings. This will be in the next episode and well worth watching. With this job, I'm sort of modifying and learning as I go. I originally fitted cast iron piston rings to these pistons, but the grooves were too wide and they rattled them out, which was not a good thing. I think this was just bad workmanship. They were just a little bit too big for the 1/8 of an inch thick piston rings, so instead I fitted silicone rubber piston rings, and they're okay. This locomotive is not going to have a high degree of superheat, so silicone rubber piston rings are fine. The problem is, though, if there's any lubrication deficiency, they wear out very quickly. It is immediately noticeable when I sit the pistons and rods on the bench and put a steel rule across the top that they are not level. The central relieved part of this piston is no good, because it doesn't allow any access to the lock nut, and besides, the lock nut is also, as I found out later, Loctited to the shaft as well as the piston. To sum up, with these piston and rod assemblies there are 3 basic errors. The piston ring grooves are too wide, which means that when I fit cast iron piston rings they rattle about from side to side, and I can't get any access to the lock nut because the recess in the end of the piston was turned to too small a diameter, and the piston rods are 2 different sizes. I think it's a good idea to start again, but first I will see whether I can rescue the piston rods. In order to remove the lock nut without damaging the piston rod, I need to machine away the piston so I can get a spanner on the nut. To be honest, if I wasn't making a video, I would just throw these in the bin and start again, but for the purposes of a tutorial video, this is useful. Please continue watching, there are some top tips coming up very shortly. Once I'd completely machined the front part of the piston to nothing, I could then get my Barco spanner on the nut, and it was very tight indeed. This wasn't nut lock, it was more like Loctite 603, a retainer. Anyway, the nut came off without event. The next part of the job is to extract the piston rod from the piston itself. The original plan was to hold the piston in the chuck jaws as shown here, and then use the tailstock chuck to grip the piston rod, but my keyless tailstock chuck didn't grip the piston rod sufficiently. The alternative is quite simple. Use a pair of lock nuts. Here's the first one going on, followed by the second one, and I tightened these together, so now theoretically I should be able to unscrew the piston rod from the piston. But no, this didn't work. The piston rod was securely held into the piston with the Loctite 603. I recently bought a self-contained, handheld blowtorch, which is very useful because I can bring it into the workshop to do things like this. I'm heating the piston to destroy the bond of the Loctite 603. This blowtorch that I bought via Amazon wasn't particularly expensive, and it came with 2 gas canisters. Because the primary air is right by the handle, it can actually get into areas where my normal blowtorches blow out. I really bought this blowtorch to help with the silver soldering operation that's coming up soon on the boiler's firebox. But I think I will end up using oxypropane, more about that in a future episode. With the spanner on the lock nuts and the piston back in the chuck, it was very easy to withdraw the piston rod, so now I can look at them in detail. But first I need to machine the other piston. To be honest, I really don't need to do this. There's sufficient room around the nut to allow me to use a standard socket, but as today it is very cold in the workshop and my 3-phase converter is playing up, I thought I would give the lathe a bit of work to do to warm it up. And while on the subject of warming up, it's back to the blowtorch again. For such a small blowtorch, this produces quite a lot of heat. And in no time at all, the nut was easily removed. You can see the Loctite 603 residue left on the threads. This time I used the tailstock chuck method. As you can see, the piston's held by the main chuck and the piston rod is held by the tailstock chuck. By rotating the main chuck by hand, the piston rod soon left the piston. I placed the silicone piston rings that I removed from the pistons back in the box of rings. There's nothing wrong with them, and they can be used in another project. Let's have a closer look at these wonderful piston rods that are not the right length. The parallel part of the rods is actually the right size. It's just the threads that have gone a bit wrong. One end should be 3/4 of an inch and the other one should be 5/8 of an inch. In the next episode, I'm going to show how to make pistons and piston rods using a collet chuck. You should find this interesting. The process will be aimed at the beginner, but it's using a large multi-size collet chuck that I have. I use it generally for locomotive axles and anything that needs to be accurate. Time I think for an interlude. I've just had a delivery, and here it is. It is, as it says on the package, a digital height gauge. For woodworking, well, in my case, metalworking. I want to use this to accurately mark out the new crossheads I'm going to make. You can pay a lot of money for these, but I chose to buy a cheap one just out of curiosity to see if it was any good. This was the bottom of the barrel. It actually cost £13.98, including free delivery and a battery. Will it work? I will find out in a future episode. When I went to Blackgates Engineering the other day, I bought some of this. It's an alternative to the Tenacity No. 5 flux that I normally buy. I forgot that I already had quite a lot of this stuff, so now I have some more. As the name suggests, it's very tenacious stuff, and it's very good for silver soldering, dissimilar metals, and also for parts that are going to get really hot, like inside the boiler's firebox. And now, to conclude the interlude, I really do recommend buying this book. You can of course buy the drawings, but they're really big. What I do is buy the book, and then I use a scanner to scan the image, and then print it out on a piece of paper and take that up to the workshop. That way the book stays clean, and I don't have to wrestle with the large sheets of drawings. From a beginner's point of view, though, this book is really useful because there are step-by-step instructions all about how to make the individual parts. I think it's time to have a close look at these piston rods. The threads are not bad, but they're not the right length. Look at the difference here. This is not right at all. The thread at one end of the piston rod needs to be 5/8 of an inch long. This is the other end that's meant to be 3/4 of an inch long. I suppose I could turn these down and make them work, but no, I'm going to make some new ones because I think it's a good idea to show you how to do it properly. I want this engine to be reliable and give years of service, and I'm really not happy doing any bodging of any parts of the engine. What I'm doing here is checking the diameter of the original rods. It's 1/4 of an inch, but look, this is not 1/4 of an inch. It's just over 1/10 below 1/4 of an inch. So okay, that's not a massive problem. Half of 1/10 is half a thou tolerance at each side, which is not a lot. In my stock of stainless steel, though, I found this piece of stainless steel, which is the right size, 1/4 of an inch, 250 on the micrometer. So in the next episode, when I make the new rods and the new pistons, I'll be using this piece of stainless steel. And that is it for this episode. I'd just like to say, as I always do, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.